welcome to episode 126 of Loss of Lieutenant, Get Brushy with it. Tonight I am joined by fellow host.
Josh, hello.
You fucking edged us on that one. You were
Oh,
right.
yeah, well, I was expecting you to say my name, but, I do like it.
Alright, cool. We're also joined by a very special guest tonight, one of probably my best mates, and the reason that I play tabletop war games without exaggerating far too much at all. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
I'm Josh from Geelong, Victoria, and yeah, as Jordan so aptly put it, very good mates. Maybe overselling how much I influenced his ability or his where he ended up playing tabletop games. But yep, no, that's me.
More like understating how much I was bullied into playing tabletop games,
Yeah,
because that
see
is
me.
what happened.
Yeah, but that was like the group of us though. Absolutely bullied you into it.
A little bit, yeah. So that you did hear correctly. Those are two Joshes that are going to be helping to host tonight. For point of ease, regular LOL host Josh is Josh, and Geelong Josh is usually referred to as Joshy because he's a little nerd.
Yeah, I'll take that.
Yeah. However, before we do get into the main meat of tonight's episode, do have some housekeeping to take care of with the quarterly challenge N5 edition. First of all, we have our N5 wish list. We want you to send us your ideas for how you would improve the game as it stands currently. How would you have changed Guided? How would you have changed martial arts? What fireteam tweaks did you think would have been most appropriate? What new skills, new weapons, and new profiles would you have liked to see? You've still got time for the new skills and new weapons and new profiles. They are still revealing new stuff like every day at this point. I think every day has had something completely new added to the game almost. We're also looking for your N5 first impressions. We're looking for a battle report of your first game of N5. We're looking for a battle report after a few games of N5, and the most creative use you have found for the Operation Sandtrap terrain, which is definitely some of the best terrain I think CB has ever really shipped with one of their starter sets. And we want you to send all of those to lossoflieutenant@gmail.com. Then following on from that, we have the upcoming events. There are fewer of them now after the conclusion of Last Contact, and I don't remember what the Sydney event was called because Sydney doesn't matter.
Thunderdome, wasn't it? Or something like that.
Thunderdome sounds correct. So we have the Risky Rollers Annual 2024 on the 14th of December at the Gaming Arena in North Coburg, Victoria. The first N5 event, Asterix. We hopefully N5 will be out by then.
Probably not.
Oh yeah, it's looking a little bit shifty as to whether or not N5 is actually going to be out by then. Details to be declared though. All profits being donated to the Smith family, which is a great charity. All the tickets are available through the Risky Rollers website. It's a $50 entry, though there is a catered lunch. It is a big charity event, looking to get new people into Infinity, try and poach them from some of the other games that are going to be running at the event. Following on from that, we have CanCon 2025 Infinity Nationals on the 25th to 26th of January at the Epic Exhibition Park in Canberra Centre. 300 points, N5 rules, missions TBA, provided N5 is out by then, but see if it gets delayed a third time. Tickets are available right now to purchase through the CanCon website. You also have the super beginner-friendly tournament at the Squablin Goblin Belmont in Massachusetts. Sunday, December 8th, 3 rounds, 300 points, 2 lists with modified resilience operations as the set for the day, as well as the N5 startup number 1, the 25th of November at 10:30 a.m. Stone Monkey, Darwin, Northern Territory, 200-point games, contacting Sam Benson. We haven't heard anything from him if that is still going on. Presumably it will be. It'll just be more of a N4 intro, late start of N5, like playing with like the Sandtrap stuff most likely with the rules that we have.
I think he'll be playing with the Essentials box.
The Essentials box, yeah, 100%. And with that, that is all of the housekeeping, other than, of course, to shout out our lovely patrons. If you wish to join us while we are recording episodes, hear us live, listen to us, banter, and ask us questions, you can head over to patreon.com/lossoflieutenant and become one of our lovely, lovely cocks.
And then as of recording, I think the Stone Monkey thing is tomorrow, because Tristan just posted in the chat.
Nice.
So it may or may not get out by that time. Definitely the Cox will hear it. Also for in regards to the quarterly challenge, depending on when CB decides to um uh r- release N5, we'll probably add on a couple of months just to or just take late submissions for that entry and just start a new quarterly challenge next
Yeah,
year.
there's like a solid grace period going on there, I reckon.
Yeah, pretty big, because we do want to hear people's thoughts about N4. Maybe we'll just continue on N5, continue on with the quarterly challenge for next year being
The start of it, like
more an N5 focused one rather than
yeah,
trying to
like
see.
ended around like CanCon potentially, like as like
No,
the
we'll
first big.
just do the first quarter. We'll just do a first like the first
Ah,
quarter.
chill.
Yeah, we'll figure it out.
Yep.
The boys have some chatting to do.
We have some chatting to do. On to the main topic, however, get brushy with it, or how I learned to stop worrying and love painting. Because hobbying in Infinity isn't required, unlike in a lot of war games. You can, in fact, just be a Silver Surfer if that's something you want to do. But I am of the opinion, I think everyone else in this call is also of the opinion that when models are painted, everything generally looks a lot better on a tabletop.
Yeah, absolutely agree with that one. Even like the brandest newest painter who's just picked up a war game and a brush for the first time, if they are putting painted models on the table, they're always going to look better than just Silver Surfering it up.
100%. Like, I will say when I started playing, it was definitely the thing for like wargaming in general, because I started with 40k. It's the most intimidating part of the hobby in general, because it's the thing you can sort of fuck up the hardest, and there's no like guide how to do it good on your first try without just do it and hope for the best.
Well, it's sort of the hobby part of the hobby, isn't it?
Yeah.
Everybody plays games, whether it's on your phone or board games with friends or video games or sport for whatever. So putting some models down on the table and rolling dice with your mates isn't really the hobby. And so I think that Infinity players sort of need to realize that what makes you a hobbyist is actually doing the thing.
Yeah,
Putting
doing the thing.
Yeah, putting paint on models, basing models, learning new techniques, buying those crochet magnifying glasses so you can get the fine details. Um,
I'm still yet to find any desire to buy one of those, like the fucking like goggle magnifying glass with a light on it things. Like,
no,
thankfully, my eyes are still good enough to just sort of catch detail.
I just don't look at the detail. Why
You
would you
would
need to look at detail?
just brush one thick coat, baby.
One thick coat, that's what the paint's called.
100% of the time, one thick coat will in fact leave you with a painted model. I
It
think
will indeed.
I think one of the things of like why painting in Infinity is or should be more important than I think a lot of people currently kind of put it is that like white metal models look awful.
Yeah.
Like Infinity has some fantastic sculpts. None of them look good unpainted. Like, because white metal, you don't get any shadows, you don't get any, you lose a whole bunch of the detail when there's no paint on it. And a lot of the time, it just doesn't look good. Like, I don't think I've seen a single face that looks good in just pure white metal, unfortunately.
To be fair, I don't think I've ever seen a painted face that looks good, but I will be proven wrong at some point.
Ah, yeah, faces are always just the worst of it. But thankfully, there's a bunch of cheaty ways that you can, like, really easily paint a face. Um, And yeah, the reason why we've invited Josh on as well is that he's the person who taught me how to paint. I've gone in a very different direction, I would say, with how I sort of paint from the way he paints. Just in terms of like how you sort of get stuff done. But we're all hobbyists. We're all trying to sort of get people to like pick up a brush, even if not a brush, right? Like Infinity is one of those games where even if all you've done is like primed and zenithal your models, they look so much better than they do just as like base white metal. It's ridiculous.
Now's a good time to probably more formally introduce Josh. Josh, how did you get into wargaming, and what sort of started your hobby chops in terms of becoming a fairly decent painter?
So the thing that sort of got me into wargaming probably initially was like in early high school with like the original Dawn of War games from 40K and playing those and then finding out it's like, hang on, there's like minis and another whole tabletop associated game with this. This is cool as. Ended up getting a box set and a bunch of paints for Christmas that year or something, and that's sort of where it got started. In terms of like increasing hobby shops, it's been a process. Like it's just painting models, sitting down, trying to learn new things, and even just experimenting with different mediums. So recently, I've moved on to oil paints as my preferred medium, as opposed to acrylic paints, which everyone else would be more familiar with. And I'm really enjoying it. It's been great to experiment with and great to sort of see what kind of results I can get.
Well, it's just like an entirely different skill set using oil paints, isn't it?
Yeah, so like the best way to sort of describe it is with acrylics, you're layering up the paints and you're building towards the contrast in terms of like you build up the layers to get where you want the gradients to go. Um, Oils almost work in the exact opposite of that, where you pop down the where you want the highest point to go with your wet oil brush, and then with your dry oil brush, you end up like spreading it around, kind of like butter on toast, and that's how you um, build your gradients with oil paints.
I'm doing some like I've got some assumed knowledge here because obviously we've been friends for um a couple of years now. You and your dad are both serial hobbyists.
Yes.
Was wargaming your first hobby, and how do these other hobbies influence your how do these other like building, making, building, all that sort of stuff that you do influence your wargaming hobbying?
So just for a little bit more context with my hobby side of things, like at the moment I'm taken to building remote control RC model airplanes out of balsa wood and taking them down to the oval to go fly them, and that's been heaps of fun. And it's a different skill set. It doesn't always apply, but when it comes to like building terrain pieces and things like that for an infinity table, it proves very helpful. Because while it doesn't translate directly, you can get a lot of skills across from that. Um, and I've forgotten the rest of what I was going to say.
Yeah, was wargaming your first foray into like that sort of building and painting, and that's like the hobby side of
Uh,
I keep saying the word hobby, and I'm gonna get semantic satiation by the end of this and not know
yeah.
exactly what the word hobby means. But
Info anyone?
it's the only way that I can really describe it. Was wargaming your first introduction to this kind of hobby,
I
I guess?
don't think so actually, because yeah, so my family is very big with airplanes. Like my dad and his dad both served in the Air Force. I think my first actual introduction into this type of hobby was the like 1/72nd scale plastic airplanes, so like warbirds,
Um,
jets, and stuff.
Oh,
Where
really?
yeah, so it's the same kind of process as what we do with our miniatures. They're just slightly bigger. But yeah, that would have been my first actual interaction with a paintbrush and a plastic mini.
Well, like I've seen some of like the first like 40K and that, or like AOS and stuff models that you painted, and even like back then, like you started off in like a pretty good space. I don't. Did you ever go through the like the one thick coat
Oh,
type of painting?
did I never show you the first tower models that I painted?
Oh God, did no? Was it one thick coat?
It wasn't necessarily one thick coat, but like I didn't know what base spray was.
Oh no.
And
um, yeah,
and
just
yeah,
go for it. Sorry.
sorry, go Josh, go.
No. You talk. You talk. I thought you were finished.
Um, and so yeah, it was just like trying to paint, and it was like the old school Citadel
Oh
pots and stuff.
no.
Just before they made the distinction between like I think they were called foundation paints, were the old school base paints.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so it was just like painted on. It'd eventually rub off like just from handling the mini, and this is like, oh, okay, try and apply it again. And I think my edge highlights on like the towel shoulder guard were like the entire panel because I edge
A
highlight, and it's just like, oh, this is not it.
bit thick.
Yeah.
I do like me a thick highlight.
Mm.
Do you think that starting with that kind of hobbying, like, you know, that sort of intergenerational hobbying, pushed you towards wargaming a little bit, or like made you pique your interest a little bit more? Or do you think it was just a completely separate thing and you were probably gonna nerd up at any point anyway and jump into the dark hole that is, I should say, grim dark hole that is 40K and the rest of tabletop wargaming?
I think I was always sort of eventually doomed to be a nerd and a hobbyist, regardless of like if I was gonna do it the cool way, I probably would have just started building with like the RC planes and just stuck with that instead of moving into wargaming. Not that RC plane
Cool.
less cool, less dorky than tabletop miniatures, but yeah, I think I was always gonna end up playing war games at some point.
Well, I guess you have to get away from plastic glue sometime, don't you?
What do you mean? I
The
have a pot just on my desk here, so I can snip it whenever I want.
the fumes kill brain cells. I think on the next slide, we have some examples of Joshy's work.
Yep, some
Yeah.
Infinity stuff and some 40k stuff.
Yeah, not the clearest pictures, but it definitely just shows that I think these are your sort of two sort of latest Infinity models that you've been painting up, and then are these? I don't know anything about 40K, but I assume that they look like Eldar to me. Are these recent ones? These 40K models?
So the 40k models are probably some of the most recent 40k models that I've painted. The Eldrad, so the one on the far right, is actually a competition entry that I painted up for the local Warhammer store. And it's probably to date the single best mini I've painted.
And how did you
Um,
go in that competition, by the way?
I think I ended up coming around fourth.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, so I just missed out on podium, which is unfortunate, but
I think you should have been on the podium. I saw like the third place entry. It was very much down to like a personal taste thing.
All right, thank you. I do appreciate that, but yeah, as it is, unfortunately didn't make podium. But still very proud of that mini, and that was a lot of hours, that one.
I remember that.
It
Yeah,
looks like it's a lot of effort going into that.
yeah, and yeah, unfortunately the photo was taken with 10 minutes before the start of the podcast, so
I will take the blame for that. Yeah, that was on me.
That's
yeah,
okay. We can pop these ones in any other photos you might have. We can pop them in a Google Doc and chuck them in the show notes for people who are listening along on the
yeah.
podcast, just to
We
see
can.
what Joshy's painting chops are like.
Yeah, I
Mhm.
think you've got your Instagram as well, right? We can probably whack that in the.
Yeah, I'm not super active on it, but my Instagram is there, and it has it has much better photos of the Eldrad mini on there.
Yeah,
What is your Instagram handle, Josh?
That is asking me a question. Give me
How do you
one
not
minute,
know your Instagram handle, my man?
because I don't use
he's
Instagram.
not active on it apparently.
Near snow, one word.
There you go. At Near Snow.
Yeah.
Near
Oh,
NEAR Snow SNOW.
Yeah.
yeah.
You
So
can see a lot of my recent work, including some of my earlier stuff from before.
I think the like if everyone does go on there, I think the Mephiston you painted like during COVID when you got me when like the group got me into 40k in general is still holds up as a really good paint job.
The paint job's very fine. I'm not unhappy with it. Looking at it now, I know where I could make improvements, though.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
So I am curious though on what your sort of take on this is because I think a lot of people have the view that like Infinity models are like hard to paint because they're on like a smaller scale and there is a lot more sort of detail packed onto the miniature. Where do you sort of what's your sort of opinion and where would you like rank Infinity in terms of like being like a difficult to paint war game? Because I've got my own sort of feelings on it, but I'd really like to sort of hear where you're at first before I say anything.
So, in terms of like, if we compare Infinity to Warhammer, Warhammer has recently become a much more detailed like in terms of the amount of detail on per mini. That has increased a lot in the last few years. But they're a much larger, not a much larger, but they are a larger scale to Infinity. I would actually rank Infinity as a fairly hard miniature game to paint if you are aiming to paint every single detail on the mini. That being said, I also am of the opinion that I don't believe you need to paint every single detail on the Mini.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Okay. So we've established that. Well, thank you, Josh, for your wonderful intro into how you got into the hobby and sort of how you got here, which is just many, many hours of painting and experimenting. Many, 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 many hours. And we've established that Infinity is difficult to paint. It doesn't. The rules of the tournament setting don't promote
Enforced.
or enforce painting, or even just sort of promote painting as
Yeah.
as an option. And I mean, CB doesn't have a line of paints.
But yeah, they're trying to sell.
With their name on it that they're trying to sell. What do you think the best point to start is for a new player or someone who's just getting into the hobby? Like, I mean, I started the hobby. I started wargaming. Infinity was my first war game, and I started
Mm.
during COVID. I'd only experienced like maybe putting a little bit of paint on some D&D minis before that, so I'm certainly not a great painter. How would you get like a novice like me, obviously, with someone who like and who doesn't have the same neuroplasticity as a teenager? How do people get started?
So just like if they're coming in, they're interested in the hobby and want to just start painting, start playing the game, but just have never picked up a brush before from that
Mm,
kind of perspective.
yeah.
Honestly, I would sit them down and get like if they've got their box already and some paints, and like if I've got my stuff with them, I'll loan them whatever is needed. But I would sit down and just teach them slap chop.
Okay. For people who aren't aware, people should be aware. What is slap chop?
So slap chop is it's fairly new in terms of painting styles, just because of the what's the name of the paint? The contrast paints. That's
Contrast
it.
paints.
Yeah, just because contrast paints and a few of their competitors now have come out in
Yeah,
the last few years.
relatively new, but like becoming less new. Because I think contrast paints are like almost a decade old at this point.
Wait, actually? Oh,
Oh yeah.
I feel like
okay.
it's close to that.
All right. No, fair enough. It's
I
still
could I
new
could be
relative
wrong
to
though.
most things. I
Hold
know.
on. While you're talking, I will go look this up now.
And so slap chop is basically you base spray your model black with whatever base spray that you need to use. For metal models, you need to start with an etch primer and then a colored primer, or
Yep.
just a colored spray. Plastic models, you can just go straight with your base primer. Um, and then basically you take them up the steps with dry brushing. So for those who aren't familiar, dry brushing is when you load up some paint on a brush, you wipe off like 90% of it onto a paper tissue or something similar, and then you just dust over the model lightly, just trying to catch the edges. And then it just brings out the detail really cleanly. And so you go up through your grayscale. So you start with like a dark gray, medium gray, light gray up to a white, or you can cut that down into less steps if you want to.
Mm.
But the idea is that you focus each time on higher and higher points each time you go over with the dry brush. And then once you've done that, you take your contrast paints for whatever color and basically just block in the parts that you want to be that color. And because of the nature of contrast paints, where they are fairly translucent, they will show all of that shading that you've done with the dry brushing, but then stain the lighter parts whatever color you want. And so you can get a really nice result for, I don't want to say low effort, but for in terms of difficulty, it's pretty beginner
It's a
friendly.
it's a very cheaty gradient, and it looks especially good on Infinity models because there's in my experience at least on a lot of like your S2 size models, there's very little in the way of like flat paneling. Everything is like textured. Everything has got like a lot of like it's either flesh or it's fur or it's like fabric, and the armor panels themselves tend to have a lot of like edges and whatnot on them. So there's nowhere for the contrast paint to really fail to sort of grip, basically, is for lack of a better term. Also, I did go and check it. Contrast paints came out in 2019, so 5 years I was off.
Yeah. The method of painting is about 700 years old. Though it used to be called grisé or en grisé, which is a French term for painting in grayscale. And then people used thinned paints over dry brushed grey then white to create the similar thing. But GW's just made it easy
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I
by
didn't
making
realize that was that old as a painting technique. How about that?
yeah. There's just a little bit of Josh has
actual
Wikipedia. Josh's Wikipedia up on his second screen.
actual painting lore.
Yeah, a lot of old hobbyists will know it as en grisé. If they don't know their French, they might call it en grisaille. So obviously contrast, speed paints, whatever, are good. They're good for a first step. I know that I painted my Caledonia with slap chop, and it was very, very quick. I think I spent all of about 3 hours on the entire army. But it is at any kind of real glimpse into um, the paint job will tell you it doesn't hold up to really fine like getting down on one knee and having an actual look, a squint at the model.
Mm.
Where do you go from slap chop into building up sort of to a more detailed miniature?
So in my opinion, like just start experimenting, and I think Jordan is actually a very good point case for this. Because when Jordan started branching away from Slapchop during his own growth, I noticed the first thing he started on with was like, I'm going to paint this power sword. And how do we layer this up and how do we start doing those kinds of things? So it was just a case of like, oh, okay, yep, we can start looking at some gradients, some blends, and how to achieve certain results. And so it's not a case of you need to go entirely from Slapchop straight to painting everything in layers with really nice gradients and smooth highlights. It could be just, I want to make this sword look a little bit better than the rest of the model so it stands out. And that's how you experiment and that's how you branch out. And then eventually you'll go to your next model afterwards and you're like, oh, I'm going to do this next bit really nice as well. And then from there, you can keep extrapolating and keep growing as a painter.
I think I wouldn't give me very much credit because it wasn't even Slapchop that I started with. It was Paint the Necron Silver. So we were starting from very much zero. Something else you can do as well when you want to start moving away, like if Slapchop is the first thing you're doing, Slapchop provides a really good like base and like kind of cheaty gradient. If you just want to go like the next step up from that, it's as simple as just like doing some really basic like edge highlights in a new color on your slap chopped models. Like as soon as you just start adding like additional little bits and pieces in terms of like highlighting, everything sort of starts looking a lot better almost immediately. Like you can generally like just slap chop lets you get away with not having to do that. But as soon as you start adding that to a slap chop model, it starts looking better pretty much immediately, in my opinion, at least.
No, that's a very good point as well. And it's also another good thing that'll teach you some more fine brush control, which will serve you well further down the line.
Yeah, edge highlighting teaches you a lot of things. Mostly, it is to hate the color white.
No,
So
don't feed into the self-loathing.
white, no, ivory. Wait, that I don't hate ivory.
We like ivory.
I hate the color ivory.
Okay.
Um,
Hi,
Jesus
Ivory.
Christ.
can't wait for them to hear this part of the episode.
Oh no.
Okay, so it's sort of teach like new players, sort of teach them slap chop, then see where they want to pick out different highlights and or if they want to upgrade their like a detail on a particular part of the model, you can start slowly teaching them more and more and more technique. if we get back down to sort of the nitty gritty, you say you come with they come with their box. Maybe they've got some paints, and and that paint might be an edge primer, a spray primer, and some acrylics for dry brushing, and maybe their favorite contrast. What other sort of equipment would you sort of expect, or think that people should pick up as a sort of matter of course?
I think one of the highest recommendations I can give, and something that improved my painting dramatically, was the purchase of a wet palette.
Not for contrast paints though.
Not for contrast paints, but just as a painter, that
Yep.
was an incredibly valuable tool. A similar tool, just you don't necessarily skimp out on brushes. I'm not saying go drop hundreds of dollars on the finest Kolinsky Sable brushes, but don't buy your cheap dollar store stuff, because they will just split and be awful after half a use.
You can get like good brushes for like you can get sets for like 40-50 bucks and they will last you.
Yeah. And with that, a good investment as well is brush soap, just so you can invest in keeping your brushes nice. And there are specific dry brushing brushes that you can purchase, which are just broader. They almost look like makeup brushes. And they are very handy to have as well, especially if you're going down that slap chop route. Very helpful to have those. And I'm running out of things immediately off the top of my head.
Yeah. I will second the wet palette more than anything else. I think as like a completely new hobbyist, the thing that changed things the most for me was definitely when I bought a wet palette and started using it. And it was like, oh, I don't have to like rush with my paints because they dry. I can take my time. They stay fresh on the thing forever, basically, or for as long as I'm painting with them for. Like worrying about like thinning them as well isn't as much of a stress where it previously was, because the wet palette sort of takes care of a lot of that for you. And yeah, I cannot more highly recommend that you invest in a wet palette if sort of hobbying is something that you find a fair bit of interest in.
Once
Yeah.
again, not for contrast paints.
Not for well, you actually
Actually, I disagree. Yeah, you can absolutely use contrast paints on a wet palette.
Also not for dry brushing.
Well, no, not directly for dry brushing. No.
no. No. There's actually arguments to use it for dry brushing, funnily enough, but
Only if you want your dry brushing to look really wet.
yes.
Yes.
A little bit wet. If you're doing over brushing instead of dry brushing.
Yeah, that one.
Okay. So we've got brushes, we've got a palette of some description, wet palette, a contrast paints. That's another thing. Have you experimented with other painting brands, or have you really only stuck to the Citadel contrast? So, do you paint with a different brand
I
paint?
I paint with a lot of brands at the moment. So I own Reaper paints, I own Vallejo paints, I own Citadel, I own, was it Scale 76? I've got some of their paints as well.
75.
75, sorry. I am not loyal to any one paint brand. I will buy whatever paint I feel is best and what will serve the need that I have for it. I think overall, if you would like to be a brand loyalist, Vallejo would be my pick, as they are the most consistent across their range, and they come in dropper bottles and not pots.
The
'Cause
dropper bottle is like pretty elite.
the Citadel paint pots, while sort of kind of useful if you don't have a palette, because it makes it easy to take it directly from the pot, they're just bad.
Yeah. The old crusty ring of paint
Yep.
it's bad.
They just they eventually dry up, crusty ring of paint. They don't close properly after a while, and then you're just stuck with a dead pot of paint.
Yeah. I will say, because I agree, I think Vallejo is probably one of the best on the market right now. I do think that like Citadel Metallics are pretty much the best on the market, in my opinion. I love using my Citadel Metallics even on Infinity, where I think people are weirdly averse to using metallics. It seems like in my experience, there's a lot of like bias towards more like non-metallic metal and like painting looks. But I
I,
look, I'm a slut for a metallic.
I think that comes down to how it's presented on the box art as well, though.
Mm,
'Cause everything on the Infinity box art is all presented as non-metallic metal, and they're very high quality paint jobs.
they are.
Yeah, and so people just try to emulate that, which is not a bad thing to do. Nothing wrong with it, but that's just I think where you end up with that steering away from metallic paints in Infinity.
Yeah. So in terms of, because one of the hardest things I think with hobby tends to be like the motivation to like actually paint something. When you're like sitting down to work on a project, work on a specific mini, work on an army, how do you sort of approach time allocation? Almost like, do you sit down and you're like, I'm going to paint until this mini is finished? Or is it more like, I'm setting aside 2 hours, I'm going to do like painting without distraction basically and just get through it that way? Like, are you working by the mini or are you working in like time slots?
I think I sit down and I allocate the time that I would like to sit down and paint. What often ends up happening though is once I sit down, get started painting, I will just end up painting until the mini, whatever mini I'm working on, is finished. The exception being like the Eldrad piece from earlier, just because that was not possible in a single sitting.
No.
No. But like the Zulu Cobra of mine was more or less a single sitting. Um, but that was still like 3 or 4 hours. But I think I was planning to sit down for like an hour, hour and a half, get started on some things and see how I felt.
I assume not including the resin pour, right?
Yeah, no. The resin pour was a separate beast.
Bit of experimentation there.
Bit of experimentation. Very happy with the results. But yeah, no, that was good fun working out how to do that. My scuff system of like cutting a PVC pipe and hot gluing it to the base.
Yeah, that is a choice.
It worked.
Yeah, I mean it worked. You had like minimal like resin spill, didn't you?
There was a little bit of resin spill, but it was mostly where the pegs of the model sit into the base.
Oh, sure.
That's where it ended up leaking through mostly, not around the rim of the where I had the hot glue and the PVC pipe.
I mean, if it works, right?
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. What do you think for the most part is sort of like is stopping people from painting more for a game like Infinity? Do you think it is just that there is no painting requirement, or is it just because hobby is difficult?
It's probably a little bit of column A and a bit of column B. So if you look at a game like 40k where you are penalized for not having a painted army, people will make that concerted effort to have their army completely painted. Um, but that also doubles with GW minis being slightly easier to paint overall, I would say. But then with a game like Infinity, it can be very daunting to sit down and look at something like Zulu Cobra or some of the more detailed models and be like, I don't even know where to start with this. And I do get that mental block sometimes, and I do understand it's difficult.
Yeah, it's definitely something that I've kind of come across when I've sort of sat down to paint something. It's like I'm looking at all these details and I'm like, in my head, the way I sort of is I'm like, all right, what am I sacrificing here? Like, what is not going to receive attention, and yeah, what is going to be end up being like a casualty of the paint job, basically.
You can definitely do that. And I think the Zulu Cobra sort of emphasizes that greatly, where I spent way more time painting his little cloak thing instead of his legs. His legs are very, very basically painted, but also half of them are covered by resin, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, you get like the neat underwater effect just sort of covers up for a lot of that.
Yeah, exactly.
Um,
Hmm.
so Josh, what's sort of stopping you from painting something like your Caledonia, right? Like, how come is it that sort of like time pority so kind of thing stopping you from painting more stuff, or is it just sort of there's no requirement, so it's pretty chill?
That's a good question. Definitely Caledonia. My Caledonia was the first sort of foray I had into getting my army fully painted and like consistent um painted. the sort of by the end of it, I really enjoyed the look of having like a painted army, and so that's sort of where I sort of derive a lot of the joy of painting from. It's sort of like I hate this process, but I'm gonna like it when it's finished. Um,
Yes.
I think my Caledonia, I think that I don't need to touch on anymore because it was a stage in my painting career um that I can look back on and I can go, okay, this is how I've improved as a painter since.
Mm.
Um, Granted, I haven't done a lot of painting. I've been a bit time poor in terms of hobbying. Work's pretty busy for me at the moment, and new relationships and things like that. So I've been a bit like life's sort of gotten in the way of doing a bit of painting. But then again, I have been doing. We've had a Infinity Australia, Secret Santa, and that I have a model on my painting table, um,
Or your
that I
Secret Santa.
for my Secret Santa that I am slowly plugging away at, and I'm very,
Oh yeah.
very keen to get it done. Mostly because I'm hating the process.
Yeah.
Very keen to get it done. I think it was probably I bit off a little bit more that I could chew. But
You tried to be very ambitious.
I have been very ambitious, and my time has not been able to keep. It's mostly being time poor. So just getting the slap chop on was good enough for me. I
Yeah.
also find like a lot of my joy as well with painting comes less from the actual painting itself, and I really, really, really enjoy basing miniatures.
Oh really?
I don't know what it is. I really like the sort of diorama style thing you can do with like a display board and the story that you can tell um, with the basing. I think is sort of where I get my joy um, from the hobby. Also, I think my paintbrushes are getting a bit sad, so I need to stop off at a hobby store at some point soon
Invest in some brush soap.
and get some new and yeah, invest in some brush soap and get some new thank you, Tristan. My Oyuroi is still a work in progress, but it is good. I am enjoying it. I do need to base it.
Oh, your
Um,
Odoroi was like a dope fucking kit bash.
I love converting. I think that's my other thing as well. I really enjoy converting models. I'm not very good at it. I'm not
No,
as
I've seen your Odoroi. Shut the fuck up. It looks
I'm
immaculate.
I'm not a I'm no Angel Duraldez, I'm no Danny Carroll. I'm not a master with green stuff sculpting. But I do enjoy a bit of a kit bash. For folks playing along at home, I don't have any photos of it yet, but my Oyuroi, I bought a Guasia model and I cut the tactical box off the plastic Oyuroi. And so my Oyuroi is standing above a slain Guasia with the
So you don't.
tactical box with its foot from the tactical box in the Guasia's chest cavity. So it's quite a neat little cute bash. I quite enjoy it. I've also magnetized the crazy koalas, and they sit on the base with the Oyuroi, and you can just take them off and put them on their own little magnetized bases as well. So um doing that sort of diorama and basing stuff is a lot of the joy of painting for me. The problem is it's the last step, and I have to paint a model first, and I really don't like doing it. So I'm going to paint when when I get my Shin Batai stuff out. I had a scheme in line for my torchlight, which I'm now going to transfer over to the JSA, the new JSA stuff. So,
Oh yeah.
um, I'm very keen to do that. There's no slap drop involved. So I'm hoping that uh, I can get those done in time for maybe Arc if um it runs again. But I think Arc is going to be probably a bit ambitious. Might be, might not be. We'll see.
Yeah.
And get a nice display board done for them and everything like that, because I think that'll be lots of fun.
Yeah. I think
So yeah. Also, just finding a hobby guru that you gel with, that can help you out with stuff is lots of fun. Is like very helpful.
mm,
What I did is actually one of our very dear friends, Ryan Kirby, is the manager of a games workshop in Melbourne, and he's a excellent painter. And being the manager of a games workshop means that you can just wander into your games workshop and your local games workshop and sit down, and he'll give you a miniature and he'll give you the paints. And he'll help you through put your thoughts onto the model. And having that afforded to me is as an opportunity is quite good. So
yeah.
there's lots of things you can do. Um, there's lots of things you can do about getting your paint skills up and trying to find the joy in it. But I think you've got to find one particular bit that you really like doing. For me, that's basing and kit bashing, and then keep running with it until you get to that end result that you really like. You
Yeah.
might really like gel with contrast and really want to smash out an entire Caledonia army in 3 hours, basing included, um, and be fairly happy with it because my efforts were in the basing, and the basing tells a story, and it's the detail that I put onto the miniature, and they really work.
Hell yeah.
So there's things that you can do to sort of get away with a a shitty paint job.
Yeah,
Um,
totally.
yeah. So to answer your question, I'm time poor,
Your
but
time, Paul?
yeah.
I think for me a big part of it was always like every time I've sort of sat down with like a new army, my goal for every 2-day event that I've been to is that I want to be fully painted, and being able to set that goal in my mind generally lets me kind of just crunch out pretty much whatever it is that I'm trying to do. I think I have, off the top of my head, managed to be painted for every 2-day event that I've gone to so far, and it's just a case of like kicking my ass into gear in terms of like, no. I have set this goal for myself, and I'm not going to make myself a liar right now. What about you, Josh? Joshy? Do you have any sort of specific like ways you sort of get yourself off the ground in terms of like painting stuff? Like I remember several late nights with 40k. I also remember Jordan painted gold.
Oh no! Oh, the golden brick. So the story here being, I think it was before a RatCon or a 40k or 1-day 40k event, and it was the night before, and I wasn't quite yet fully painted, and I had just purchased a dreadnought that I needed painted, and the color scheme for my army was gold, so Custodes type color scheme, and I was still busy detailing some minis, and Jordan was like, "Yep, I'm done. I'm good now." I'm like, "All right, cool." I handed him the dreadnought and just said, "Paint it gold," and boy, did he deliver!
Yeah.
It was a very luminescent gold brick.
Well, yeah, we'll need to find it at some point. There's a photo of Josh's Blood Angels that he took and sent to the group chat, and it's these very nicely painted Blood Angels. And then in the back, there is just a luminous golden dreadnought, fucking just glowing because of the light hitting it.
Golden bricks.
Yeah.
It was such a brick.
But yeah, in terms of just breaking that deadlock, if I'm not feeling particularly motivated to paint, it can be difficult. I think having some deadlines, like what you're saying, where you set the goal of being painted for every Infinity event, and that helps you kick your butt into gear. I think that's sort of something I need to start working on myself, because the hardest issue for me with painting is actually just sitting down and picking up the brush.
Mm.
Mm.
No.
Even though I really enjoy painting, it's just something that because I know what I'm like with when I pick up a brush, a 2-hour time block that I set for myself to paint will turn into 6 hours or 4 hours or however long is reasonable before I need to sleep.
Yeah. Well, hobby tends to have this sort of, for me at least, it tends to have like this kind of cascading effect where like once I've painted the first model, it becomes really easy after that to try and paint like one model a week, basically. Because
Yeah,
it's just sort of getting over that initial hump and going, all right, cool, we can do this now.
See, I'm a batch guy. I love batch painting.
Yeah.
Give me 6 models to paint, and I'll have them done by the end of the week. That's totally fine. But like I need to. Well, I need to have the models in front of me because bloody combat company's taking forever to ship my
Yes, they
Sandro
are.
models. And I don't want to paint anything else because I don't want to paint anything else.
I
I've got.
honestly think upcoming CanCon might be the first time I'm not fully painted because I have
I
no idea what I'm gonna play.
I definitely don't know. I don't even know if I'm going to CanCon, to be completely honest with you. But
Fair.
I don't even know what I'm playing for risky rollers. So um, wouldn't have a clue.
Yeah, totally.
In That's in December. Um, so there's lots of discussions to have with myself. Hopefully it's N5 so I can bust out them some Shindenbutai and
God, I
everything.
hope it's N5. Man,
Mhm.
the delay has just really thrown a fucking wrench in the works, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's a bit disappointing, but CB's got a CB, so it's fine.
It
And
is, yeah, put effort
Spain's
into work.
underwater,
Yes,
so
pain
well,
is underwater.
at least it was a week ago, so it's hard to. But we digress. We are tangenting.
We are
Um,
tangenting a little bit. Yeah, I
mhm.
think that's honestly, I think we kind of like smashed that out. Like, I feel like we kind of hit the majority of the points there. It's just, I think the big takeaway from this is just don't be scared to start. And once you've started, it gets a lot easier to kind of keep going. And I at least found this really cool thing of like, pretty much after each model I've painted of a scheme, the latest model is always the best model I've ever painted. And it's a really good feeling when you can like feel those changes and you can feel the improvement with each thing you paint.
Yeah, absolutely. And don't be scared to experiment with different techniques and different things. Like, always be willing to branch out and try something different with the brush. Yeah, it all helps.
Yep, 100%. I think those
I Yeah, Angel Durrell does videos on Instagram. Fantastic. Find if you really like a particular style. I follow a bunch of like random painters on Instagram.
yeah,
I follow a bunch of like random hobbying groups on Facebook, like Evia Metal and like all that sort of stuff. They just chuck in like guys who are just doing
immaculate work.
rare, amazing GW models or Infinity models or something. Will often on their Instagram will show you their process to getting some certain things. There's a guy I cannot
Yeah.
remember his name, and it's gonna. It's I hate crediting or not crediting Instagram things, but he paints murals
Oh my god.
on the shoulder plates of his Space Marines. It is actually insane the freehanding he does, but he shows you the process in on his Instagram, and
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you what the Instagram was, but um that's sort of less the point. It's more that the um you can there are nuggets of information everywhere. There are YouTube videos galore everywhere. If you if you like learning by doing and learning in person, jump down to your local GW. I know like jump down to your local Games Workshop store or Warhammer store, and ask the guys there, how do I start painting?
Yeah.
Because they will give you a free model. They will give you a free lesson on how to paint something, how to paint a miniature. Even if it's just putting a couple of coats on something, it's all going to be um good. And they often ask their customers to paint display armies and things like that because GW runs like Warhammer shops run through models like nobody's business. So
Mm.
they always need stuff painted, and so they're always happy to help out people who are willing to help paint stuff.
Yeah.
So there are loads of avenues to learning how to paint.
Yeah. I think
Um,
I think
One
Tristan.
final,
Sorry.
sorry, one final thing from me that I would like to say as well is, like, yes, look at all of these other people and learn from them. Don't compare yourself to them.
Yes.
Yes, because that is like the quickest way to demotivate yourself and sort of break your own heart trying to paint.
Comparison is the thief of joy.
Yep.
Yes. Like, do not compare yourself to them. There's always going to be someone who can paint insanely well and will make you think that everything you've painted ever looks like complete shit. Just don't compare yourself to them.
Yeah, just don't do it. It's not worth
Compare
it.
yourself to me instead.
Exactly.
Go onto the Discord, go into the Lost of Lieutenant Discord, find my Caledonia, and go, they look like absolute dog shit. As long as anything that I paint looks better than that, you're fine. It's fine.
Yeah.
Everything looks better than my Caledonia. The bases are good.
I think Tristan's made a really good point here as well. I think it is really important to kind of trust the process and not give up halfway because it isn't good yet. It can be really demotivating, and like that last little bit you put on can really be the thing that like sells the model. Like I've hated models that I've been in the process of painting, and like I painted the sword. I'm like, all right, we're in. We like this now.
Paint fixes all sins, and the most clemency granting paint is Agrat's Earthshade. So
Null oil is called liquid talent for a reason.
Yeah. No, doesn't exist anymore, I don't think. Does it?
Yeah.
So yeah, just wash your models. Clean your models, etch your models, wash your models. I think that's about
That's
it.
about it. This has been really fun. Honestly, I love just getting to talk about hobby.
Hobbying is good. I am slowly learning to love it a little bit more. So hopefully in the new year I can have a little bit more consistency with my hobbying, and hopefully show some people some semi decently painted JSA.
For Arc, hell yeah.
They'll look great, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that kind of brings us to the end of the episode today. Thank you everyone for joining us and listening. And until next time, I've been Jordan.
I've been Josh.
And I've been other Josh.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, and see you next time.